2024 Nobel Peace Prize winner commemoration. Unknown disciple. Witness in the atomic bomb. English version. I was born in Setagaya, Tokyo, in May 1944. Gradually, the U.S. military air raids became more intense, and I was caught up in the so-called Great Tokyo Air Raid. My mother held me and fled to the air raid shelter every time the air raid siren sounded. My father decided that this was not good, and we all decided to flee to my mother's parents' house in Hiroshima. However, when I was 1 and 3 months old, we were living in Hibakusha, Hiroshima City, 1.4 kilometers from the hypocenter. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. At that time, my father was off duty and watching over me as I was toddling around. As soon as the flash of the atomic bomb was heard, my father threw himself over me, and I was saved without injury. However, the radiation from the atomic bomb affected my bone marrow, and my doctor said that I was anemic and that no medication could cure it. I also developed high blood pressure as an adult. Furthermore, when my mother carried me to her parents' house in the suburbs of Hiroshima, I was exposed to the so-called black rain that contained radioactive ashes. As a boy, I was weak and had poor physical strength in school physical education, and I could do push-ups, horizontal bars, or vaulting boxes. I was always last in marathon competition, and I could swim long distances, and I could only swim 25 meters. I always had the worst results in physical education classes. On October 11th, 2024, the Japanese Organization of Atomic Bomb Victims, the Japan A-Bomb Victims Association, Nihon Hidankyo, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. It seems that our steady efforts were recognized. We have continued to appeal for no more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki, no more Hibakusha, and no more war. We appealed to many people through testimonies from atomic bomb survivors and nuclear movements, anti-nuclear movements, and petitions. The world is currently facing war, and leaders are threatening to use nuclear weapons. The atomic bomb survivors are living proof that if nuclear weapons are used, humanity will be wiped out. They are not even willing to listen. The parties involved in the war are acting because they believe they are right. Only God is truly right. We just need to stop the war and leave it to God. True peace will come if we follow the words of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Soldiers, lay down your weapons. Go back home and enjoy your lives. We have had enough of this chains retaliation. The people of each country should stand up and say, "No more war," loudly. Make those in power realize how foolish they are. Please tell them that they are neglecting human life and the importance of life. Please open their stubborn hearts. Please think about the atomic bomb survivors who became victims of war and those who lost their lives in the war. October 19th, 2024, Yoshito Yagi, the son of Masato Yagi. First of all, this book is a record of souls of those who, while facing death through illness and the atomic bomb, were kept alive by the atoning love of Christ, and as anonymous disciples of Jesus, served God's love and were called to Him. This is also my account and testimony of the atomic bombing as a survivor. The justice and cruelty of the atomic bomb make me feel frustration and sadness that cannot be expressed in words. No matter how faithfully I try to portray the fear, suffering, and misery of the victims who are still suffering from the after effects of the atomic bomb. I believe it will not be easy to convey the reality and have them understand it. Nevertheless, I felt compelled to write this book because the atomic bomb is an issue that concerns the essence of war and peace, and has important issues that must be pursued in human solidarity. I would be happier if this book could be used for God's service as a testimony to those who are exposed to the nuclear crisis in a devastated society, that the gospel of the Bible is the foundation of your lives. June 10, 1984, Masato Yagi. Witness the atomic bomb. Prologue. The atomic bomb continues to this day. In the run-up to the 39th anniversary of the atomic bomb, I visited Hiroshima in mid-April and prayed in front of the atomic bomb memorial scenography early in the morning on the day of Holy Week. I mourned my sister and mother who died in the bombing. My mother had surgery for the injuries she sustained in both legs at the time of bombing. But glass fragments that has embedded themselves deeply in her legs could not be removed and remained there. Although she suffered from the after effects of the atomic bomb, she was supported by God's hand and passed away 10 years ago at the age of 82. Hiroshima has been rebuilt and its appearance has completely changed to a modern city with no trace of the city from the time of bombing remaining. However, the scars of the atomic bomb still live vividly in the minds and bodies of the atomic bomb survivors. The scars of the bombing still make the survivors fear the fear and anxiety of death and impose many problems on the lives. Needless to say, the heartfelt wish of the survivors who are devastated by the inhumanity and cruelty of nuclear weapons is to take up this mistake, which must never be repeated, as a common problem for all mankind, and to abolish nuclear weapons altogether and establish permanent peace. However, as the memory of the atomic bomb fades, the danger of threat of human alienation and nuclear war are increasing, in contrast to the economic growth and prosperity of a peaceful Japan. As the atomic bomb dome fades, the movement of eliminate nuclear aloud is progressing. The photos of the atomic bombing at the World Expo site are being removed, and the horror of the atomic bomb is the only way to prevent the atomic bombing from fading and being buried is to continue telling, writing, and readings. The dwindling number of atomic bomb survivors must resist fading and dig up their original experiences, show a strong desire for peace through the tragedy of the atomic bomb, and pass on their experiences for the future of humanity. Records of the atomic bomb must not be limited to the recollection and transmission of the tragic past, and lose sight of essential issues. They must allow people of all generations, both survivors and non-survivors, to turn their attention from the cruelty of the atomic bomb and the tragedy of war to the essence of war. This must be understood in the context of returning to the origins of the atomic bomb. It is time that we return to the origins of the atomic bomb. We must recall what God is trying to us through the atomic bomb, what is being asked in the misery and cruelty of the atomic bomb. and what must we respond to? I'd like to return the origins of the atomic bomb, and by digging into it again, explore the true nature of war, and from deep reflection, pursue what it means to be human being and how we should live, and share my original experience, hoping to use it as a starting point for true peace movement. One, avoiding the ravages of war. It was on March 10th, 1945, that I decided to move my family to Hiroshima. At that time, I was living in Sakuradosui, Setagaya Ward, and was mobilized to a munitions factory in Akabane, leading students from Seigakuin Junior High School, where we were exposed to the danger of B-29 bomber attacks every day. In mid-May 1939, when the second Sino-Japanese War was already in full swing, I received my conscription notice in Hiroshima, was assigned to an infantry unit as a replacement soldier, and was sent to central China. I fell ill during the fighting, was transferred from one field hospital to another, and was sent back to the mainland without receiving adequate treatment. In October 1940, I was returned to my original unit, the 49th Kofu Regiment, from the Army Hospital in Sakai, Osaka, and was discharged in same month due to illness during the war. I returned to church in Hiroshima and continued to work there for recuperating. After that, I moved to Tokyo as religious educator and worked at Aoyama Gakuin. And in the year of the Great Tokyo Airways, I worked at Seigakuin Junior High School. In that year, 1945, the Pacific War was already showing the signs of terminal illness. Up until that point, airways had not only been limited to Tokyo, but had been occurring all over the country, with about 60% of the Keihin, Hanshin, and Chukyo regions being burned down. The Great Tokyo Airways began at midnight on March 9th. Large formation of B-29 bombers scattered and continued to drop in incendiary bombs. The fires caused by the wet rain and hail of the incendiary bombs quickly turned the night sky of the capital red. The night I evacuated my wife and young child to an airways shelter. I dressed in disaster prevention clothing, stood in front of our house with neighbors gazing at the burning sky. This area had been evacuated early on, so we escaped the air raid. At dawn, my wife's eyes were black shot from lack of sleep and fatigue when she emerged from the shelter, and our young child's face was covered in mud, probably because he had been sucking on his fingers while playing with the soil in the shelter. Seeing this, I made up my mind to leave Tokyo. In one night, 40% of the houses in Tokyo were burned down, and 100,000 people died. The government had already issued orders to evacuate the elderly, infants, and school children. In the wartime emergency situation, it was sad to say goodbye to the students who had shared the good and bad times with us. We left Tokyo in late March. Trains heading south on the Tokaido line were loaded with war victims and evacuees, and there was so much chaos that it was impossible to stand. Fearing attacks by the U.S. Air Force, trains were often forced to stop, and people were terrified. Most of the major cities had suffered damage from air raids. Nagoya and Osaka were particularly badly hit. At Nagoya Station, we could see the revised cityscape beneath the charred steel beams, and it was as if we are witnessing the horror of war, first-hand gasping for breath. We finally arrived at the military city of Hiroshima, which was shrouded in the darkness of blackout. Exhausted, we changed into a travel gear at my mother's house in Hibakusha. 2. Beneath the mushroom cloud. That day was also humid morning. It was a Monday, but I was a teacher at the old Sanyo Junior High School at that time, and I was taking some mobilized students to work at the Nippon Seiko Company in Mukainada. As it happened to be a public holiday that day, I woke up later than usual. It must have been just after 8 o'clock when the radio announced that the alert had been lifted. With relaxed eyes, I followed the movements of my younger son, who was toddling around next to me. At that moment, I thought I heard a faint roar of an airplane in the distance. Suddenly, an easy, unpredictable sense of danger crossed my mind. I instinctively pulled the child's hand toward me. In that moment, a truly intense flash pierced the back of my eyes. I was blinded. The platinum yellow light was filled with large amount of magnesium. We mastered all our strength and desperately tried to make a breakthrough. Covered in blood, we crawled out on the top of the house with all our infants in our arms and stood up to call for help. Carefully, I mastered all my strength and desperately tried to make a breakthrough. Covered in blood, I grabbed my toddler and crawled out on the top of the house to call for help. Seeing the devastation unfolding before my eyes, I wondered what had happened to me. Every house I could see had collapsed and been torn to shreds. Electric poles had been torn to shreds, and all the trees had been torn off and were smoldering like sticks that had been stubbornly stuck up. Remnants of crumbling, reinforced concrete buildings remained here and there. Diagonally across from my house was the Yasuda Girls' School building. It was here that morning assembly was being held. The two-story school building had disappeared without a trace, and the buildings that had been tragically destroyed were scattered like rubble grumbling into piles of rubble. If I raised my head, I could see for miles around the entire city of Hiroshima reduced to ruins. Yellow dust was rising everywhere. The sunlight was gone, and dark clouds filled with stagnant heat hung over the sky. There were no people in the city, and not a sound could be heard. It was eerily quiet, eerily quiet. It was the silence of death, a city of death. I felt like a very long time, but it happened in an instant. I must have escaped very quickly. At the moment of explosion, people in the neighborhood were either killed instantly or crushed by collapsed houses, hovering between life and death. I gasped, seeing the devastation unfolding before my eyes. I wondered what had happened to me. Every house I could see was completely destroyed, broken into pieces. Electric poles and wires cut to shreds, and all trees were torn up and smoldering like a charred sticks. Remnants of crumbling reinforced concrete buildings remain here and there. Diagonally opposite my house was Yasuda Girls' School building. It was here that morning assembly was being held. That two-story school building had disappeared without a trace, and the ruined building was scattered like rubble and had crashed into piles of rubble. If I looked up, I could see the entire city of Hiroshima in ruins for miles. Yellow dust was riding everywhere. The sunlight was gone, and dark clouds filled with heat were hanging over the sky. There was no sign of anyone in the town. Not a sound could be heard, and it was eerily quiet. It was the silence of death, the town of death. I felt like a long time, but it happened in an instant. I must have escaped very quickly. At the moment of the explosion, the people in the neighborhood were either killed instantly or crushed under the clasped houses, hovering between life and death. I sensed that the situation was not going to be easy. We could not afford to waste even a moment. I searched for my wife. I was sure she was near the entrance. She had been blown away by the blast, and I found her huddled among the scattered beams near the back garden. On the opposite side of the entrance, I yelled, "I'll rescue you now," and pulled her out. She seemed injured, but fortunately she was able to walk. I could not find my mother anywhere. Fires were already rising over one, and smoke and flames were blowing out. I handed the baby, who was clicking to me, over to her, and being careful not to get caught in the sea of fire, evacuated the place quickly. I prayed for the safety of the mother and the child as they left, and searched for my mother in the grasped house. As I continued to shout loudly, I hear a groan from near the kitchen. "Masato, I'm here, I'm here." I looked and saw that her lower body was buried in the dirt, and her upper body was covered by countless beams, pillars, and pieces of board, blocking my view. As I was trying to rescue my mother from the place where she was trapped, my younger sister, Haruko, came running in, crying, "Brother!" I looked in shock and I looked in shock and saw that the burns all over her body were still fresh. Her white blouse was scorched and torn to shreds, stained with blood. Her black mompe Japanese-style pants was torn like rags, and her protruding legs were blistered and looked painful to look at. Brother, Mom, Sister, Yoshito-chan. Mama is here. Yoshito has just evacuated her. With my mother growing in front of us, my sister and I felt the need to rescue her quickly, no matter what. When people face a crisis, they are given extraordinary strength. My sister was seriously injured, and I was covered in wounds. But we are crawling away. The heavy pillars and beams that were holding my mother down on the earth that had buried her. All the while, my mother was in unbearable pain and said, "I'm old and can't take it anymore, so you guys need to get out of here quickly. Mom, you shouldn't complain. You have to do your best." My sister and I are so absorbed in digging out the dirt that we didn't even notice that the nails on our fingertips and become tattered. When our mother was finally rescued, she was unable to move due to the sudden impact and the pain of our wounds, and crouched down on the spot. Her legs had turned purple from the pressure of the dirt, and thorns from wood and broken glass were piercing her everywhere. She looked so painful that she couldn't walk. Looking around the fire, fires and had broken out everywhere, and it seemed like the whole city was engulfed in fire. If things continued like this, it would only be a matter of time before everyone was burned to death. As for my sister, she was standing in a miserable state, wondering how she had made it this far in such a body. She was barely standing, supported by her desire to help our mother. We had to get to a safe place. We had to leave. My sister and I had to hold our mother up by her shoulders, forcing her to walk, even though she was in pain. We had barely walked a few steps when the man next door came running out from inside the ruined house and said, "Yagi-san, give me a hand. My wife is lying there." "Let me carry her on a back." I ran to her, leaving my mother and sister to wait. But it seems she had been blown away by the blast and suffered a severe blow to her heart. With great difficulty, I was able to put his wife, who had lost consciousness and was in a state of suspended animation, onto the man's back. With tears in his eyes, he repeatedly said, "Thank you," and staggered off in the smoke. When I later met the man again and at a suburban site, he had found that his wife had died on the way to safety. He thanked me in tears, saying that thanks to Yagi-san, he had been able to be with his wife as she died. But when I thought about how he must have felt at having his beloved wife taken from him in this way, I was overcome with an indescribable sadness, and I could not help the anger that welled up inside me toward those who had taken the lives of his loved other ones in this way. In silence, we made our way slowly across the burnt gravel of the land, avoiding the fire, towards the bank of the Oto River. Looking back, I saw a crowd of atomic bomb survivors following us. I don't want to know when or where they had gathered. With pitiful expressions, some had barely made it out of collapsed houses. Others had been thrown to the ground and were catching their breath. Some had disheveled hair, fresh, torn up, and brown skin dangling. Some were naked and wounded. Wearing only dirty, tattered clothing, all whose faces were covered in soot and blood from the breast and mud, and their eyes were wide open and vacant. No one spoke, and it seemed as if the slaughtered dead had been brought back to life and were continuing their death march. Suddenly, a naked boy of about 10 years, all wearing a hoodie, jumped out from the roadside where collapsed houses were scattered, which seemed to be street corner, and stood in front of me, clasping his hand and desperately pleading, In the direction the boy is pointing, mountains of collapsed houses and smoking. I want to save him. The boy is straight at me, starting at me. The boy is staring at me. I would like to help him if there was time. The crisis is upon us. The step of the serious injured who had lost their way and were following me made the situation worse, making it even more difficult to escape from the dead city, raging with flames. The boy was to run back. We must not kill this boy either, I told him, crying. In this situation, it was no longer possible to rescue his mother. I explained to him briefly that if they did not escape as quickly as possible, the boy and the dozen or so other victims here would all burn to death. Say goodbye to your mother here, and live for your mother's sake. Thinking of the boy's sorrowful feelings, I could not help but cry at his heartbreak. The boy ran back under my arm, but stopped midway, turned to the collapsed house where his mother was trapped, put his hands together, and ran back again, following me. When I thought of the life and death of parent and child torn apart under such circumstances, I was speechless. Every time August 6th comes around, the image of the sad boy that day comes to mind, with a shadow of self-blame and regret that there was nothing that could be done. The boy escaped with us that day is now a man of over 40 years old. He must be facing this way with a heart-rending feeling of sorrow and lamentation caused by the war. We finally escaped to the bank of Otaruga, but the Sanjo Bridge had collapsed. Looking upstream, the National Railway Bridge connecting Hiroshima and Yokogawa had not fallen, but the sleepers were smoldering, and fires were lighting here and there. If we escaped this far and headed towards Nagatsuka, which was thought to be a safe area, we had to cross this iron bridge. My mother said she couldn't move any further. I encouraged her, saying that we would be safe if we crossed this bridge, and my sister and I took her hands and put our arms around her shoulders as we crossed the smoldering iron bridge. 3. A dying angel. Having barely made it across the iron bridge, we collapsed onto the sand on the riverbank at Oshiba Park. It must have been around noon. From the other side of the riverbank, black smoke was billowing up into the sky, and raging flames lit up the dark sky like sunset, and the stormy evening covered Hiroshima at midday. The river and the riverside were filled with waves of miserable atomic bomb victims. They crowded together, groaned, and lay down, swept away. The appearance of bombed soldiers who had escaped from the West parade ground was truly horrifying. They had been walking, and most of them were nearly naked and had done their best to get here. Some had collapsed, their skin like logs. Others had thrown out their hurt, burnt limbs and were crying out in pain. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to look directly at such a gruesome group of victims. My wounded body and mind, exhausted all energy, had become numb. Conscience, and good sense had also stopped. In a daze, we huddled together under the pouring black rain. It was an abnormally black rain that charred corpses formed a clump together and sank down the Ota River. Beside me, a Korean mother was gazing at the surface of the river, crying like a mad woman, wondering if her child had been swept away somewhere. When I came to, I saw my sister was wrapping cloth around the wound on our mother's leg and treating it. I looked over and saw a naked soldier standing there, covered in blood and with exposed skin, his clothes having been burned off by the heat rays. My sister stood up and took the silk kimono that her mother had taken up and offered to him, and draped it over the soldier's naked body. The soldier was overjoyed, with tears in his eyes. He warned my burned sister not to drink the water, as if she would die. Facing the river of death, the wounded man regained the reason of goodwill given to him by God. My sister, as if it were her duty, tore off her torn white blouse and used it as a bandage to bandage the wounds of the soldiers. She continued to treat 2 or 3 of them, but eventually, exhausted, she collapsed and returned to us, crouching down. Her emaciated face and the burns all over her body were painful to look at. It was as if the flames of young life had been consumed by the kill of the soldiers, just like a dying flame that rose for a moment and then disappeared. It must have been hard. You worked hard. Let's rest here for a while. In response to my words of appreciation, my sister murmured, "Those soldiers are so stupid, so pitifully. I was amazed at my sister's work, and my heart was warmed by the admiration, while feeling ashamed of myself." At that time, my sister was a nurse at the Hiroshima Prefecture Health Center, and that morning, for some reason, she said she didn't want to go today and left. On her way to work, she was exposed to the atomic bomb when she stepped onto the train entrance at the Hibakusha train stop. She was hit by the intense heat rays and burst and slammed into the road, losing consciousness. When she regained consciousness, the parcel she was holding had been blown away and was no longer visible, and her entire body, except for the head, was burnt. She was wearing white blouse and black mompy pants, just like the women during wartime. I later learned that black mompy pants were the most likely to absorb the radiation of the atomic bomb, and the radiation had penetrated and destroyed her lower body, even down to her bones. She was on the road, buried under the rubble of past houses, and her severely injured body, clad in clothes, torn by the heat rays and blast. I wanted to take my injured and exhausted mother and sister somewhere and treat them, but they said they couldn't move. I searched the embankment for any vehicle, but there were none. Trucks would occasionally pass by, but they were full of injured people. At that moment, I remembered that there was a branch factory of Nippon Seiko Company, which was being mobilized near Gion, upstream of the Ota River. I decided to take her there. It was not far from Oshiba Park, where we had rested, but it was dusk when we dragged ourselves to the factory. Looking back, the whole city of Hiroshima was engulfed in flames, burning the night sky red, and we could hear explosion and popping sounds in the distance. The people at the factory remembered my face and immediately made a room available for me to lie down. They said to my mother and sister, who were lying down, "It must have been hard. We are making lots of rice balls for you to eat now. Please eat them. You must be hungry." They gave me a big rice bowl. Thinking about it, we had drunk a drop of water or eaten anything since morning. I tried to eat, but for some reason, I felt nauseous and couldn't get it down my throat. I was not the only one who felt nauseous. My mother, sister, and all the other survivors said they felt nauseous. This was due to the inhaling radioactive fallout. We later found out that it was the result of inhaling radiation. We had to wait until the next morning for the nausea to subside. That night, my mother and I were unable to sleep because of the intense pain from our wounds. Despite the relief, having evacuated to safe area. However, my sister was in agony, unable to sleep at all, as she was in increasing pain from burns all over her body, and high fever, and dawn came in a sleepless state. I felt I had to treat my weakened sister as soon as possible, so I wanted to take them to the Okao family home in Nagatsuka, where my wife and her parents live, which is closer to the Gion branch factory. Some of my students were also mobilized to work at this factory. The owner of the factory, who looked after us, contacted the students nearby that morning. 3 of them rushed to help us. The students carried my seriously injured sister on a stretcher from the factory to the Okao's house. There we were reunited with my wife and child, who we had been separated from since the morning before. 4. The whereabouts of the infant in mother's arms. This is a record of the evacuation of my wife and eldest son, whom I rescued from a collapsed house. I have written down exactly what she told me about her experience. As soon as she received the infant from me, she immediately ran into the air-raid shelter in the garden, took out her air-raid food and my mother's clothes, and put them over her clothes, which was ripped and torn, wrapped the infant, covered in dirt, and wearing only bare red food, held him in her arms, put on her sandals, and evacuated with the infant on one hand and the other pair of sandals hanging from the other. She headed toward Nagatsuka, hoping to escape to her parents' home, but smoke and fire were already building up and blocking her path. So she headed for Yaezu Shrine, the opposite direction from the one we had taken. We in Hibakusha town had been designated as an evacuation shelter in the event of an air raid at Hibakusha Elementary School. But when she arrived, the school grounds, the school building, had collapsed and fires were raging all around. At the school gate, there was only one naked person, completely blackened by heat rays and burns, standing there in a daze like a monster. The daughter of a woodworking shop near the school called out to me that she would run away immediately. But after that, I didn't see anyone for a while. The tops of electric poles along the road to Tokiabashi were on fire. We stepped over mountains of rubble with nowhere to step and waves. Smoldering wood from collapsed houses stumbled across the bridge and escaped to the upstream of Kyobashi River. Houses along the road were on fire, so I walked across the sand, but as the explosion ignited with a horrible quacking and booming sound, I frantically ran away, holding tightly to my frightened young child. Escaping the flames, I finally managed to climb up the small hill that the engineering corps was using as training ground. After dropping off the Yoshito, I took a sign of relief, and in the shade at the bottom of the mountain, I found a house that had escaped corpse. There was a well nearby, and I called out to the pumps to ask if I could use the well water. It looked like someone had crawled out of the mud. She washed Yoshito, who had crawled out of the mud, and then washed her own hands and feet. After resting on a mountain for a while, the miserable victims, whose bodies had changed, climbed up one after another and collapsed. For a while, she was surrounded by groans and cries, and we were unable to look at horrific scene. At that time, black rain began to fall, and people took refuge in the bamboo grove. The low dull sound of the roaring plains made everyone fearful of another year raid, and they felt like they were dying. By chance, a man from a house on the edge of the mountain gave her a belt and bag containing about a cup of hard work bread and rice, and kindly asked, "Put your baby on this. Do you have somewhere to go back to?" Grateful for the warmth of the people's hearts, she carried her baby on the generous spirit, descended the mountain with a bag of food she had been given. She went out to a work site for the engineering corps, but here too, soldiers who had been exposed to the atomic bomb were hundred. It was horrible to look at the horrible sight of soldiers, charred, blackened, and covered in wounds, searching for foothold to avoid stepping on those who had fallen on or were lying down. She came out to the source of Oto River. A crowd of victims was flowing along the bank, naked and barefoot, people in tatters falling along the water. As she was being swept away by the current, she gave her wooden clothes to a person with bleeding feet. At the foot of Shitayama, upstream of the Oto River, there was a ferry boat to Gion. She asked the boatman for a ride and headed out Gion Shrine. Victims had gathered here, and the village's medical team was working to take the victims into private homes and treat their wounds. It was evening when she made her way through the people lying around and arrived at the home Nagatsuka parents. The house was located quite some distance from the hypocenter, but the ceiling had been blown off by the blast, and the house was completely destroyed. Inside the house, household goods and kitchen utensils were scattered, telling the destructive power of the bombing. Thus, the baby's life and was carried safely to his grandparents' house, supported by the kindness of people in his mother's arms. Thus, our reunion was greeted on the morning of second day in tears of joy. Hallelujah, Haruko. My father's parents were Christians and people of faith who had been serving the church for a long time. After worrying about our safety and praying for us all day and night, they offered a room for our family. My sister was unable to get up again after the students carried her to the house on a stretcher. At the time, no one knew that the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was an atomic bomb. It was known as a new type of special bomb, and it was only a few days later that it was identified as an atomic bomb. The next day, I walked back to Hiroshima under scorching sun to get the first aid supplies and other things that I had stored in the air raid shelter and house. Over the next few days, I went into the burnt ruins of the city to contact the schools and to assess the damage to the students. The earth was scorched red. The ashes were still smoldering, and were here and there in the ruins were pieces of wood telling people where to evacuate, signs asking about the safety of relatives, and everywhere you could see people searching for their remains. At Okawa family home in Nagatsuka, my younger sister, unable to move, suffering from the pain of burns and high fever, lay in agony of radiation sickness, receiving careful nursing care from our mothers while they prayed. My wife often rushed to Akiyama Clinic in Gion to see him, but the doctor was busy treating the victims who were brought in one after another and could not let go, so he would only hand out mercurochrome. At that time, the widow of Reverend Yamamoto Ryukichi had evacuated from Tokyo to the Okawa family, and the Okawa parents were taking care of her. Mr. and Mrs. Umeda, who had returned from Kure, were also staying with the family, relying on Mr. Umeda, the wife of an acquaintance of his, was exposed to the atomic bomb at Hiroshima Station and came to the Okao family with burns to the upper half of her body and was bedridden. The Okao family, with so many victims of the bomb, never ceased to show their love and labor. From the third day after the bombing, my sister continued to have high fever of over 40 degrees every day. Unable to get dry ice, they continued to cool her with well water. Fortunately, my sister had evacuated to the Okao family bodies clothing absorbent cotton, alcohol, etc. that the health center had entrusted to distribute in case of an emergency. So my mother and I were able to disinfect my sister's whole body with alcohol and treat her wounds by applying mercurochrome. Within a week, the skin on her legs where the burns were particularly bad had people peeled off and the wounds had become infected and maggots were crawling out of them. So my mother and I had to use tweezers to pick them up one by one and disinfect them. She had no appetite and could only slap up porridge. Her condition only worsened, and after about 10 days, her fever reached a high of 42 degrees, and her heart weakened day by day. Pastor Yamamoto's widow read the oracle and prayed for her day and night. During that time, despite her old age, she visited the victims in the scorching heat, telling us about the tragedy of the atomic bomb and its terrible effect, saying, "Someone died today too. It seems horrible." Around the 20th, my sister fell into coma. On the 22nd, at my sister's request, I injected bitter camphor into her arm with unfamiliar hands. With her mind becoming cloudy, she said, "Brother, I want some food." I walked far away to find a shop to find some food. But there was nothing. I gave up and was on my way home when I finally managed to find a bunch of grapes, just one bunch, and full of home. I put grapes one by one into my sister's mouth, who was thirsty from fever. "Thank you, brother. I leave everything to God. I'm going to be with my father, my late father." These were the last words my sister spoke to me. Since falling to the atomic bomb, she had not complained or uttered a single word. She had simply endured the pain. The next morning, on the 23rd, my sister's chest was heaving with heavy breathing, including that death was near. Dr. Yamamoto and myself, her mother, and I gathered at her bedside and read the Bible and prayed. As the consciousness faded, my sister nodded several times and murmured, "Amen, Amen." But suddenly she said, "I can see Jesus," and quietly passed away, still holding our hands tightly. Her face was still hot and red, as if burning. She endured long, but she was called to God without suffering, leaving behind a peaceful, gentle, shining face. She was 24 years old. My younger brother, Akira, who was studying at a naval account school, visited my older sister, Mitsuko, who had married and moved to Hamada in Hamada when he heard the news that Hiroshima had been completely destroyed at the end of the war. When they rushed to the Okawa house together, it was 30 minutes after my sister was called home, and they were unable to make it in time for her final moments, and they could only burst into tears. The next day, we held a quiet funeral, and with the help of our neighbors, we carried her body to the mountain behind the Catholic Church in Nagatsuka, where we cremated her with our own hands. The next day, my mother, who was in pain, accompanied by my younger brother, left Hiroshima to take my sister's remains and place them in the grave in Yamanashi Prefecture, where my father rests. Her name was Haruko. This was the name my father, who was a pastor, gave her. My father wanted to call her Hallelujah. The name was made by playing with the sound of the word Haru, light. It obviously means glory to God. Our father had a heartfelt prayer and wish that she would spend her whole life serving God and people, please God, and be witness to the glory of God. She was born on April 28, 1919, as the second daughter in a parsonage at a church in Yokomachi, Yamagata City. From early age, she had a cute and gentle personality, like a Japanese doll, and was loved and adored by her friends and adults alike. As her father was transferred, she had to transfer to elementary schools in Ida, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. When her father suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and became bedridden, she retired from the military and moved to Tokyo. Thanks to the kindness of Mr. Jiro Hamasaki, she was able to enter Toyo Ewa Girls' School in Azabu and live in its boarding house. Due to the financial difficulties, when my parents returned to their hometown of Ichikawa, Yamanashi, she dropped out of Ewa and became a trainee nurse at uncle's pediatric clinic in Kofu, helping with the housework. There, she attended nursing school and obtained her nursing qualification. With the help of my father's acquaintance, Christian, Mr. Seizo Miyake, she was assigned to the Tamanoshima Health Center in Okayama Prefecture, and then transferred to Hiroshima Health Center. After living apart for several years, we were able to live together with my family on Hakushima in Hiroshima, the year of the atomic bomb. In response to my father's prayer, she confessed her faith and was baptized as a young girl. Her short life was by no means a blessed one in the eyes of the world. When my father fell ill, she helped my mother after his death and supported the family. She carried the cross, served the sick and nursed, and served her family as a Christian. Armies of mankind caused one cruel devastation of the atomic bomb. She stood at the origin of the gospel and, forgetting herself, solved the pain and suffering of the Hibakusha who are wounded and falling to their death. In the midst of the atomic bomb, she testified to Christ's redeeming love and was called to reveal the glory of God, as her name suggests, like a white lily blooming purely and gently at the foot of the cross. She scattered her pure young life, offering it for its glory of God. Truly, Hallelujah, Haruko, Amen. 6. The challenges of my original experience and my desire for peace. I was exposed to the atomic bomb at Nishihakushimacho 123, within 1.4 kilometers of the hypocenter. I escaped from under Papa's house and escaped being burned to death. I sustained burns to my left arm from the heat rays. bruises all over my body, including my head, and immediately after the burning, I felt fatigued, and as if my hands and feet were falling out. I continued to feel nauseous. My hair began to fall out day by day, and I was purged by malignant tumors all over my body. These airborne diseases made me fear death for about 2 years. After that, I seemed to have recovered my health, but within a few years, I developed high blood pressure and have been plagued by various illnesses and physical abnormalities ever since. My wife was also diagnosed by a doctor with anemia due to the atomic bomb and suffered from osteomyelitis like symptoms such as swelling in her hands and feet, and often complained of difficulty walking due to the pain. She also suffered from headaches and dizziness of unknown origin, and was often bedridden. A few years ago, she was temporarily diagnosed with leukemia and was forced to be hospitalized. It is estimated that there were about 420,000 people in Hiroshima at the time of the atomic bombing, and documents and surveys suggest that the death toll was more than 200,000, but there is no conclusive evidence to support it. There are about 160,000 survivors, and these survivors continue to complain about the physical abnormalities and mental anguish caused by the atomic bomb, which they have never experienced before, and feel frustrated that no one understands their symptoms. Those who are not directly exposed to the radiation but entered the hypocenter after the bombing or were affected radiation while disposing of the bodies or providing medical care also developed symptoms of the atomic bomb and died or developed other after effects of the atomic bomb and suffered lifelong sufferings just like the survivors. Their lives and livelihood are threatened by various symptoms of the atomic bomb and unclear condition called atomic bomb hanging disease, multiple cancers, cures caused by burns, microcephalic children born to the pregnant victims, orphans and elderly people caused by the atomic bomb, and other problems. However, compensatory relaxation and measures have not yet been fully implemented, along with the issue of providing support to the victim. The issue of medical elucidation and treatment is an urgent issue. The explosive power of the atomic bomb generates an extremely high temperature of 3,000 to 4,000 degrees, and it is said that it emits radiation that can completely kill a person up to 1 kilometer in direct contact with it. It is impossible to measure how powerful it is. The damage and devastation of the explosion and the after effects of the atomic bomb that continue to this way destroyed humanity to its very core. The cruelty of the damage the atomic bomb caused to humanity was truly unparalleled, and the misery is beyond description. Whatever the reason, the inhumanity and cruelty of nuclear weapons can never be justified or tolerated. This, along with the fervent wish of the atomic bomb survivors, in particular, that such tragedy must never be repeated, is the starting point of the peace movement. In recent years, a controversy has risen in Hiroshima over the inscription on the atomic bomb memorial. Rest in peace, for we will never repeat this mistake. Those who insist on amending the inscription say, why should the Japanese people who suffered the atomic bomb apologize? Is their responsibility unclear? In response, those who are in favor of protecting the inscription say, the mistake, the inscription refers to the original sin, and humans being nuclear weapons. To kill other humans. Denying this original sin would pave the way for Japan to become nuclear armed. With the 25th anniversary of the atomic bomb approaching, this debate was put to an end for the time being when Hiroshima Mayor Norio Yamada declared that the inscription will not be amended. This shows that the atomic bomb is not simply an issue for the individual victims, nor is it limited to Hiroshima, but an issue for all of humanity, and that the existence of nuclear weapons that move international politics, the fear of nuclear strategy, and deep ties to the peace movement are the backgrounds to this. The pursuit of responsibility for the atomic bomb at the time of its dropping, along with anti-American, anti-war, and anti-nuclear sentiments, led to the movement to demand the inscription. This confirmed that the monument would be bastion of the peace movement in the changing situation where the number of nuclear-armed countries is increasing. The memorial is an expression of the desire for peace that reflects the voices of ordinary citizens, which want to create a great spring that will inspire people to take action against war. Even someday, some says the issue of responsibility for the bombing will become empty if we pursue responsibility without questioning personal responsibility. There is not our fault, but the other party's fault. The pursuit of responsibility for the dropping of the atomic bomb is linked to the pursuit of responsibility for war crimes and goes back to the responsibility for the war itself. In the case of the atomic bomb, the origins of war are being questioned. We must understand that responsibility for the atomic bomb and the war itself is being questioned in terms of human solidarity. War is a matter of mutual responsibility and a matter of the original sin of humanity, which is the root because of war. From this starting point, Christian historians must accept the question of the atomic bomb, delve deeply into the original experience, and based on a sense of solidarity in questioned humanity, strive for peace through deep self-reflection and to take steps toward the peace movement. This is the mission of those who remain. Written by Masato Yagi, translated into English by his son Yoshito Yagi, and reading is also Yoshito Yagi.